What's going on, guys? LordKing here, back with another UFC preview video. As you can see, I am not on UFC 2 playing the PS4 today. I'm actually on the UFC's website and Sherdog's website. I'll put the links in below if you want to see it for yourself. We'll see how this video goes. I'm not too massively sure on the actual copyright sort of standpoint on this, so if it gets removed, it gets removed, and I can do some more just on the PS4. But I thought I'd give you this as a different sort of aspect to it, a bit more stats. So I'm not going to go over the prelims too much as I did with the previous video, but the ones that do stand out to me are Patrick Cummins versus Jan Blachowicz. So we have relatively similar fighters with similar sort of physical stats. Patrick Cummins is a very good wrestler. He has good stand-up as well, some big hands, some good hands, and he's a very good wrestler, as mentioned. 6.87 takedown average, which is incredibly high. It's 50% takedown accuracy. Whereas Blachowicz, again, he's a well-rounded fighter, but he has some very good stand-up, especially his kicks. His body kicks are bloody great. So his takedown percentage defended is 33.33. So that isn't the best. This could be a fight where it almost depends if Blachowicz can defend the takedown. Looking into Jan's record, he is 19-6, age 34, coming off his most recent loss to Alexander Gustafsson, which was a little bit back and forth, but in the end it was a unanimous decision for Gustafsson. He just showed he was the better fighter. Previous losses to Corey Anderson, Jimmy Manuwa, and such, both of which obviously you've seen. Jimmy Manuwa absolutely destroyed Corey Anderson recently. Patrick Cummins, 36, he's 8-4, but his losses have only been to some of the best people. So we have Daniel Cormier, Ovin St. Preux, Glover Teixeira, and Nogueira. So now, obviously, Daniel Cormier is fighting on this card as well. He was kind of manhandled by him and lost by TKO in the end. Ovin St. Preux, again, a very good fighter. Recently lost to Jimmy Manuwa in a previous loss as well, which I thought he won. Glover Teixeira got brutally knocked out by Rumble Johnson, and Nogueira, obviously, no need to say about Nogueira, the legend of the sport. So again, I think it will be Blachowicz trying to defend the takedown if he can and keep it standing. It may be an interesting fight. The next interesting one that I saw on the prelims is Kamaru Usman versus Sean Strickland, the Nigerian Nightmare versus Tarzan. Both only lost once, but Strickland has won double the amount of Kamaru Usman. Now, I do think Strickland's record is pretty padded, to be honest. Not in the sense padded, but I think he's taking it very slow to build him up into something that he could be. Usman's kind of gone through the Ultimate Fighter, so had to put himself at the test, a big test from the very beginning. He's also incredibly experienced and very smart fighter. Usman's got good stand-up and he's a very good wrestler. Strickland has very good stand-up. So as you can see, the significant strikes, the actual striking tends to favour in Strickland's favour. Apart from the accuracy, his defence is a little bit higher. When it comes to takedowns, Usman has a 5.26 takedown average, very high, with a 56% takedown accuracy. Strickland has a very good takedown defense though, so it's going to be interesting to see what kind of happens here if he can get a takedown and maybe grind on him and then maybe get a submission, even maybe not a submission or a TKO, whatever could happen. Looking into their records, again, Usman has fought some very good people recently: Hadi Hassan, Leon Edwards, Yakovlev, and Wally Alves. Wally Alves being probably the biggest prospect who was meant to come out of Brazil until the loss to Usman. He still could be something very good, but we're waiting to see a bit more from him. Sean Strickland, again, very young, 18-1. Like I mentioned, his record is a little bit padded, having lost to Santiago Ponzinibbio, who has incredible stand-up, and he's a very good fighter. But he's recently coming off a win to Tom Breeze, which is a very good fight. But he hasn't fought in nearly a year now, so maybe he's developed a little bit better. Right, moving on to the actual main card, the interesting parts. Will Brooks versus Charles Oliveira. Will Brooks, very good stand. He's actually coming from Bellator, and he was one of Bellator's best sort of things. I believe he was lightweight champion, and he came over to UFC to kind of prove himself in a better sort of ground. He has incredible stand-up. He has good wrestling as well, training out of American Top Team, so he knows how to deal with some of the best people on earth. Charles Oliveira, again, very good stand-up. He is not very good. He has good stand-up. He's quite good striking. But when it goes to the ground, his jiu-jitsu is on another level. He is incredibly good jiu-jitsu. Not on the same sort of thing as the Damian Maia and Jacare Souza, but he has very good jiu-jitsu. As you can see, Will Brooks edges it in the significant strikes landed. The accuracy, his defense slightly higher as well. The grappling, Oliveira seems to have a high takedown average. I believe that's mainly because he actually tries to... one of his main objectives is takedowns. As you can see, he finished 62% of his fights via submission. So I think one of his main things actually is takedowns. His accuracy isn't that good, as I believe his takedown, his wrestling isn't the best, but his ground game actually is good when it comes to jiu-jitsu. Brooks has an 86.11 takedown average, which is incredibly high. They both match up relatively similarly in stature as well. So, by the way, guys, at any time, feel free to pause it if you think I'm going too fast or whatever, if you want to take a little bit of a further look into the stats. As I said, I will link them below. So now, Will Brooks, 18-2, he's 30 years old, American top team. He has a very good record. He has fought some very good people, as you can see. Bellator for a hell of a long time, decisions, TKOs. Michael Chandler, 2 wins over Michael Chandler. He is not to be looked over. An incredible, I believe, he's champion now at Bellator. An incredible fighter. It's just beating Benson Henderson, I believe. So then we have Marcin Held, Ross Pearson. He lost to Alex Oliveira, not to be confused with Charles Oliveira, as we have here, but Alex Oliveira, who was also known as the Cowboy, the other Cowboy, not Donald Cerrone. He had the Brazilian one, and Will Brooks kind of took I believe it was a bad punch or whatever it was to the stomach, and I think he may have broken a rib, and you could tell he was in visible pain throughout the whole fight, any takedowns and things, and then it was kind of just almost ended. He couldn't really do too much, and he eventually got KO'd. Well, it was given as a KO, so. Charles Oliveira, 27 years old, slightly younger, 21 wins, 7 losses. What we have here is, again, a very good record with some of the people he's beaten, but then also some of the people he's lost to over the years. Jim Miller, Donald Cerrone. These people, I'm sure you know, are some of the greatest fighters, so there's nothing to be ashamed of. Cub Swanson, Frankie Edgar. He's beaten Jeremy Stevens, one of the hardest hitters in featherweights. Lost to Max Holloway, lost to Pettis, and coming off another loss to Lamas. So 2 losses in a row. Maybe he's trying to bring something back to it. Maybe he's reinventing his game a little bit, a bit more stand-up. We'll find out, but other than that, I'm going to favour this one to Will Brooks. Moving on to the next fight, Thiago Alves versus Patrick Cote. Now, Thiago Alves is, if you guys have watched UFC for a while, you'll know he was probably up there as one of the most feared sort of, welterweight contenders at the time. He fought GSP for the title, and we kind of got a bit destroyed by GSP, to be honest. As we all know, Georges St. Pierre, he picks people apart. But Thiago Alves, if he can find his form, he has got that potential to be very, very vicious with leg kicks and his striking. He's a very good fighter, the Pitbull. Patrick Cote, kind of been around the block. He's fought a lot of people, and well, again, yeah, he's a very good fighter. He's got a good chin. He's got some good striking, some good grappling as well. Moving into it, 50% to KO rate versus 42 for Thiago Alves. Records are relatively similar, actually. Just looking at that, 46% wins by decision. The height, Cote has a slightly bigger height. Reach, it's all relatively similar sort of stature stats. When it comes down to strikes landed per minute, significant ones, it favours Alves. A little bit less in accuracy. Similar sort of absorbed, and Alves' defense is much higher, so I'm assuming he has a much better guard, and he's good at seeing what's coming. Grappling, again, very similar, but when Alves does decide to grapple, he kind of lands the takedowns, and if he wants to defend them, he can do significantly better than Patrick Cote. So let's look at their actual records. Thiago Alves, fighting out of American top team, the Pitbull, 33 years old, again, still relatively young in the MMA world. It isn't really the be-all, end-all of MMA being 33 years old, where it is with some other sports. But let's look into the actual record. So as you can see, before, as I was mentioning, before the Georges St. Pierre, we had a few losses, obviously, as we can see that, but he was on a pretty big streak leading up to that Georges St. Pierre fight. Then lost to John Fitch. He beat John Howard, lost to Rick Story, Papi Abedi, Martin Kampmann. These are all good fighters, but then Seth Brzezinski beat Jordan Main. He beat. Then 2 losses coming off to Carlos Condit and Jim Miller. Now these guys are incredibly good fighters. Obviously, Carlos Condit, one of the best welterweight strikers in the ever possibly. So very good, and they come off a decision to Jim Miller on the same card as you guys remember, the New York one, Alvarez versus Conor McGregor. So he has it there, but again, the 2-fight loss streak. We'll see what happens. Patrick Cote, again, slightly significantly older, 4 years, but 23-10. He's a Canadian as well. I don't know if that makes a difference to you. He came off a loss to Donald Cerrone when it was Rory McDonald versus Stephen Wonderboy Thompson a while back. Patrick Cote has also lost to Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. Wonderboy looked incredible in that fight. That was unbelievable. But losing to Cerrone just looked unbelievable in this fight. It was where Cerrone moved up to welterweight, and he just seriously looked crazy. It was a very good TKO. Not many people get the TKOs over Patrick Cote. He's known for having a good chin, as you can see. Has he ever lost by okay, he's lost by TKO to Anderson Silva, which is nothing to be ashamed of, but he's only ever lost by TKO twice, and one of them to Cerrone and one of them to Anderson Silva. So nothing to be too ashamed of. So it could be a back and forth fight. I'm going to give it to Thiago Alves personally. I would like to see him win and come back a little bit more. Then we have Cynthia Calvillo versus Pearl Gonzalez. Now, I'm not too sure if this fight is going to be third just before Weidman Mousasi. I feel it may open the card, but they have it up here anyway. So looking into their stats, Pearl Gonzalez, I'm not massively too sure into her actual background, as she is relatively unknown, but Cynthia Calvillo looked very good in her previous fight. So now they seem to have relatively similar sort of stats. As you can see, there's nothing really lined up for Pearl Gonzalez. It may actually be her UFC debut. So let's look into it. Pearl Gonzalez, 30 years old. I believe they're trying to build up this Cynthia Calvillo to try and make her become a prospect in the women's sort of divisions. So Pearl Gonzalez 6-1. Yes, so as mentioned, this is her UFC debut. Because 6-1 though, is a very good record. Now Cynthia Calvillo, 29, 5'4", 4-0, fighting out of Team Alpha Male. So you will see most likely Uriah Faber and possibly Cody Garbrandt in her corner. She recently just beat Amanda Cooper. Amanda Cooper, who was on the Women's Ultimate Fighter. This was a really good win. Amanda Cooper she was winning on the feet pretty much, and Amanda Cooper landed a good takedown. But then Cynthia kind of reversed it and did a very good sort of sweep on Cooper, and then eventually got the submission via rear naked choke. This was on the previous main UFC card, UFC 209. So she's a good prospect. She has a lot of potential. Now on to the co-main event. This could be the most exciting fight of the night, where these two people are, well, it's almost unpredictable to say with these two. Gegard Mousasi, he is, well, you can't really say too much about. He is probably one of the most experienced fighters in the UFC, stand-up wise and also MMA wise as well. He has fought almost everyone, and this is going to be his 50th fight. So wow, yeah, this is incredible. He has the most experience in the whole division, I believe, and his stand-up is just unbelievable. Chris Weidman, again, he's a very, very good wrestler with some good stand-up, coming off a really unfortunate loss to Yoel Romero. It was just unfortunate, to be honest, where he was winning. I believe he was winning the fight, and then a bad sort of takedown attempt ended up with him getting kneed in the head and knocked out in ridiculous sort of fashion. As you can see, the records don't really match up to each other. 13 wins versus 41 wins. So, as you can tell, Mousasi is very experienced. KO rate, Mousasi, like I mentioned, he is some of the best stand-up in the division, if not the UFC. Submissions, he can do it. Decisions, he doesn't win mainly by decision. Height, they match up, again, relatively similar. Weidman has a slight reach advantage, but slightly similar in stature. Significant strikes. The striking, like I mentioned, goes pretty much in Mousasi's favour all across the board, but Weidman is up there. Like I said, he has got good stand-up, notoriously known for knocking out Anderson Silva. It wasn't the best knockout, prettiest knockout, but he did do it. Takedown average, Weidman, like I mentioned, his wrestling is very good, 3.33. Takedown accuracy is not as high as Mousasi's, but he does it a lot more. And takedowns defense is also very good on both fighters' parts. Looking into them, as I mentioned, Gegard Mousasi, the Dutch native, but from Iran previously, well, born in Iran, I believe, and fled to Holland. Well, it's not really too much to say about the record. He's fought almost everyone. Most recent win, Uriah Hall, Vitor Belfort, Thiago Santos, TKO. As you can see, the one loss before a little while ago was Uriah Hall, which he did avenge his loss in his most recent win. But this was kind of I wouldn't say a fluke, but Uriah Hall did a very crazy sort of kick, and it clipped Mousasi, and pretty much it was over when he landed that. But as you can see, Costa Philippou, Dan Henderson, he lost to Souza, Jacare Souza. lost to Lyoto Machida, beat Mark Munoz. Ilir Latifi beaten Ovin St. Preux. This guy, he has fought everyone. Mohamed Lual, Keith Jardine, Renos Sobral, Mark. So now when I say Mousasi, he literally will fight almost anyone he wanted to fight. I believe when it was Cormier, when John Jones pulled out in UFC 200, he wanted to step up and fight him in that fight as well. But then obviously they gave it to Anderson Silva. But he has fought almost everyone from going back into Dream, when it was the older days of stand-up sort of fighting and things, with Pride, Dream, the K1 sort of stuff. He fought Mark Hunt. Now obviously you guys know Mark Hunt in the heavyweight division is a huge guy. Jacare Souza, Melvin Manhoef, Hector Lombard. So as mentioned, these 41 wins on his sheet are not fluky at all. He is a very good fighter with incredible stand-up. Chris Weidman, 13-2. Fighting out at Serra Longo fight team in New York, I think, Long Island. So Matt Serra, obviously, you guys all, if you do know, he was the guy who he has incredible jiu-jitsu, to be honest, but then he also came up and beat Georges St. Pierre when no one ever thought that he could after the Ultimate Fighter, and he knocked him out. Well, TKO. So if you guys watch Dana White's Looking for a Fight, you'll know who he is. You'll see him on there. So now Chris Weidman, he hadn't ever lost leading up to these most two recent fights. Just look at the people he's beaten: Tom Lawler, Damian Maia, Mark Munoz, Anderson Silva twice. Albeit these two wins were relatively lucky, you could say, with the one where Anderson Silva was doing a showboat thing and he clipped him, and then also Anderson Silva's leg breaking. But then beating Lyoto Machida, Vitor Belfort, he TKO'd. The most two recent losses to Luke Rockhold. That was a very good fight, to be honest, and back and forward. Luke Rockhold was an absolutely incredible fighter, one of my favourites. And then another loss to Yoel Romero, which again I thought he was winning, but it was just unfortunate. He then got clipped with a flying knee, and from a poor takedown attempt, to be honest. So I'm personally going to give this one to Gegard Mousasi. Now, you guys may not agree with me if you are watching this, but I believe he's going to maybe defend the takedowns if he can, hopefully, and kind of light Chris Weidman up in the stand-up. But again, this is UFC. Absolutely anything can happen, so do not take my word for it whatsoever. So moving on to the final main event of the evening. Now, this is an incredibly anticipated rematch. We're all very excited to see this. Daniel Cormier versus Rumble Johnson. Now, Anthony Rumble Johnson is known for his knockouts. This guy has dynamite in his hands. It is the only way to describe it. People say McGregor, touch of death, all that stuff. This guy is the most legitimate thing I've ever seen to a touch of death in his hand. He hits people and they take it. Now, there's always one person when it kind of goes who defies the laws of physics when it comes down to these things. In McGregor's case, it was Nate Diaz. He was the monster that couldn't be slain, and he took the punches. Now, Daniel Cormier, in their previous fight, is that guy. He took quite a few of Rumble's best shots, head kicks, punches. He got rocked a little bit and was sent flying a small amount across the ring, octagon, sorry, but he withstood the storm, and he eventually got a submission, rear naked choke submission. So Cormier's been there. He knows maybe how to handle it and what Rumble Johnson is going to come with. So let's go into their actual records. We have 18-1 versus 22-5, both very respectable records. KO rate, obviously you can see Rumble Johnson, his KO rate is ridiculous. Cormier does get his KOs as well. Some submissions, decisions. Rumble has the sort of stature advantage. He is taller, he has a bigger reach, and he has a longer leg reach. The weight, I'm not 100% sure who's going to be coming in heavier. Cormier is a very, very big guy. He did used to fight at heavyweight before coming down to light heavyweight. The only reason why he did, because his teammate Cain Velasquez fights at heavyweight, and I'm assuming he didn't want to clash with him, possibly ever having to fight him. Other than that, he was undefeated at heavyweight, so the only guy he's ever lost to is John Jones, which was his decision. So, I mean, you guys can take it from there. He is arguably one of the best pound-for-pound fighters in the world, if not ever. Significant strikes. Now, oddly to see, they favour Daniel Cormier, but this, like I've mentioned, the stats aren't always everything to look at, because they probably favour Cormier, probably because his fights go on longer, whereas Rumble Johnson, all he needs is that one sort of shot and he just knocks people out. So that's probably why his significant strikes are less, and they're not that much less anyway. So it's quite relatively similar in the stand-up sort of range. When it comes to grappling, again, like I mentioned, these stats aren't really everything, whereas it shows Rumble Johnson has a higher takedown average, a higher accuracy, and his defense is almost the same as Daniel Cormier's. When I could tell you for a fact right now, Daniel Cormier's wrestling wise, Greco-Roman wrestling, this guy is maybe the best. After Henry Cejudo actually won a gold medal in the Olympics, Daniel Cormier maybe is one of the best wrestlers actually in the UFC, the whole UFC that is. He represented Greco-Roman. He represented the USA in the Olympics. He has won multiple national championships, NCAA championships. He's a Division I All-American. He is an incredibly good wrestler. And it's been shown, if you guys just look at his previous fights or his highlights, this guy picks people up and throws them like they are absolutely nothing. It is seriously, it's scary how easy it is for him to pick people up. Even the heavyweights, he's ridiculous. So we now have Anthony Rumble Johnson's record. He's 33 years old, 22 wins, 5 losses. He was, like I mentioned, fighting out of Black Zillions, but now with Henry Hoofton, they're separate sort of thing. The Jacko Hybrid Trading Center, as they call it, well, the Combat Club, which I believe it's known as. Now, looking at his record. So now, the odd thing about Anthony Rumble Johnson is he used to fight at welterweight. Now, I'm sure you guys must know what I'm talking about. If light heavyweight is £205 weigh-in and welterweight is £170 weigh-in. Now, Anthony Rumble Johnson, I believe he probably walks around at maybe 235, maybe a bit less. I'm not 100% sure on the exact amount of pounds, so 230 pounds we'll say. So for him getting to 205 is incredibly hard. Now, how the hell he got to 170 pounds is beyond me. He looked incredibly drained, but I have absolutely no idea how he got to that sort of weight. But like I mentioned, he has been fighting for a hell of a long time with the UFC and then left and then came back again, I believe. So Kevin Burns, he lost to Josh Koscheck, Vitor Belfort, but he's beaten some of the great people. So he's beaten Dan Hardy. Dan Hardy, a great English fighter. He actually beat him by World Wrestling, to be honest, which was quite weird. Andrei Arlovsky, a heavyweight in World Series of Fighting. Phil Davis. Now these are the. When we get into the later record, we see how scary this guy is. His KO over Nogueira was quite kind of hard to watch, to be honest. It was really brutal. Gustafsson, again, what Cormier and John Jones couldn't do to Gustafsson in some of the closest fights those two have ever had. Rumble came in and just completely destroyed him. He lost to Daniel Cormier by decision, like I mentioned. He obliterated Jimmy Manuwa, killed Ryan Bader, and Glover Teixeira, as I mentioned before, was a vicious knockout. It was just a one uppercut was all it took. He's like I said, he has dynamite in his hands. Daniel Cormier, one of my personal favourite fighters. Now, he gets a lot of stick. He's almost, if you guys have ever seen wrestling, I used to when I was younger, he's the faces and the heels of the company. Daniel Cormier, for some reason, he is, to put it into a comparison sort of terms, he's the Roman Reigns sort of character where the UFC want people to like him, and he's quite a good guy, it seems, but for some reason he's just disliked. I'm not too sure why. It's when it came up against him versus John Jones, he was booed. He kind of questioned as to why he was booed. Now this man, he's been through everything from, I believe, his father dying. I think he was an alcoholic or something, and then one of his daughters dying as well. Don't quote me on that. I'm not 100% sure, but yeah, he's been through a hell of a lot in his life, and like I mentioned, he's one of the best wrestlers in the UFC, and arguably, in my opinion, one of the most humble, nicest guys on face as we see as fans in the UFC as well. So he is one of my favourite sort of guys, despite to people not having the most exciting style of fighting with a lot of wrestling. But as mentioned, he is 18-1. Now this guy, he's only ever lost to John Jones before. It's an incredible record. You can't deny that. He fights out of AKA American Kickboxing Academy. He is one of the head sort of guys of that crew. If you guys know Luke Rockhold, Cain Velasquez, and Khabib Nurmagomedov, those are the other sort of people from there, but he is almost the captain of the team. One of the best teams in the world. His record is absolutely incredible. Strike Force, he destroyed people. He came over to the UFC in heavyweights. He was people like Roy Nelson. He was just obliterating these people. And when it came to Dan Henderson, when he started this, again, I've never seen Dan Henderson get manhandled the way he did. He just picked him up. It was almost like a baby. He was on the floor and he just picked him up. It was crazy. Watch his wrestling takedown highlights. Lost to John Jones via unanimous decision. Again, a very heated fight. I would love to see the rematch there, but I also like to see Anthony Rumble Johnson versus John Jones as well. We then have Anthony Johnson versus Daniel Cormier. He obviously won by submission, Rene Cacho. Split decision over Gustafsson and a unanimous decision over Anderson Silva being his most recent fight. The Anderson Silva one was kind of a gimmicky sort of fight when John Jones pulled out. Well, he didn't pull out. He got done for the doping the day or so before. And it was Silva kind of hurt him on the stand-up in the last round, but it was a very incredibly one-sided fight. It was Cormier showing his wrestling power, to be honest, and he had good stand-up as well. So as you can see, Cormier hasn't fought since July of last year, the 9th of July last year, which is UFC 200. So now Anthony Rumble Johnson, August 20th of 2016 as well, against Glover Teixeira. But these guys have had a little bit of time to recover a little bit. DC a tiny bit longer. So it's going to be interesting to see how it matches up with them. I am putting my prediction with DC. Again, everything can go any way. There's no guarantee of it. Very quick predictions. I'm doing KO of the night for Gegard Mousasi. I'm doing submission of the night. I'm actually going to go with Charles Oliveira. So against Will Brooks, Charles Oliveira's submission of the night. Performance of the night, probably Daniel Cormier and Gegard Mousasi. I think those two will do well. Maybe fight of the night as well, Weidman versus Mousasi. Well, guys, that has been my UFC 210 preview. I hope you enjoyed it. It may be slightly longer than normal. Please let me know if you do enjoy these types of breakdowns as opposed to the other ones. Keep me updated. And as always, please like, share, and subscribe. I've been LordKing. Thank you very much for your time. Goodbye.